The French columns were already breaking apart when the realization finally settled in. What had begun as a confident imperial reconquest was ending in disorder, disease, and retreat. Along the coast of Saint-Domingue, shattered regiments waited for ships that could no longer guarantee escape, while inland, the plantations that once fed Europe's wealth burned behind them. This was not a rebellion collapsing under pressure. This was an empire being defeated by people it had defined as property. In 1804, when Haiti declared itself free, the shockwave traveled far beyond the Caribbean, and almost immediately, the punishment began. Before the revolution, Saint-Domingue was not just another colony. It was the most valuable piece of real estate in the Atlantic world. Sugar, coffee, indigo, and cotton flowed out in volumes unmatched anywhere else. Nearly 40% of France's foreign trade depended on this single territory. The colony's productivity was so extreme that it distorted European markets and underwrote French military ambitions across the continent. But that wealth rested on an industrial system of slavery that treated human lives as expendable inputs. Mortality rates among the enslaved were so high that constant importation was cheaper than allowing families to form. Violence was not incidental. It was structural, methodical, and normalized. By the late 18th century, the enslaved population of Saint-Domingue outnumbered whites by nearly 10-1. They were not passive laborers. They were field hands hardened by discipline, drivers accustomed to enforcing order, craftsmen, dock workers, and domestic servants who observed the machinery of colonial power up close. When the French Revolution erupted in Europe with its language of liberty and equality, it introduced a fatal contradiction. Rights were proclaimed universal, yet denied at the edge of the empire. In Saint-Domingue, that contradiction became combustible. What followed was not an instant uprising, but a slow militarization of desperation. Early revolts were fragmented and brutally suppressed, yet each suppression taught lessons. Leaders emerged who understood that survival required organization, intelligence, and strategic patience. Enslaved fighters learned to reign intimately, using mountains, forests, and ravines not as hiding places, but as operational depth. They adapted European drills when useful and discarded them when they were not. This was not chaos. It was evolution under pressure. France responded as empires always do when their economic lifeline is threatened, with force. Napoleon Bonaparte, rising to power in the aftermath of revolution, understood Saint-Domingue not as a moral question, but as a strategic one. Control of the colony meant revenue, leverage, and prestige. Losing it would signal weakness. In 1802, he dispatched one of the largest overseas expeditionary forces France had ever assembled, commanded by experienced officers and backed by the assumption that disciplined European troops would crush resistance quickly. On paper, the imbalance was overwhelming. Professional soldiers versus former slaves. European artillery versus improvised logistics. But paper did not account for climate, disease, or the psychological reality of fighting people who understood that defeat meant re-enslavement. Haitian forces did not seek decisive pitched battles on imperial terms. They avoided annihilation, bled the enemy through attrition, and let time work as a weapon. Yellow fever ravaged French ranks, killing officers faster than they could be replaced. Supply chains collapsed. Morale eroded. What had been framed as a restoration mission turned into a slow-motion disintegration. By late 1803, the French position was untenable. Withdrawal was no longer a tactical choice, but a necessity. When independence was declared in 1804, Haiti became the first black republic in history, and the only nation founded by a successful slave revolt. Militarily, it was a decisive and unprecedented victory. Politically, it was radioactive. For the slave-owning powers of the Atlantic world, Haiti represented more than a lost colony. It was proof that the system could be broken. If enslaved people could organize, fight, and defeat a European army, then the ideological foundation of empire itself was compromised. Recognition of Haiti was not delayed out of oversight. It was withheld as a deliberate act of containment. Diplomatic isolation followed almost immediately. Trade was restricted. Ports were closed. The new nation was treated as a threat to be quarantined, not a state to be engaged. France, however, went further. Having failed to hold Haiti by force, it moved to reclaim control by other means. In 1825, more than 2 decades after independence, French warships appeared off the Haitian coast carrying an ultimatum. Haiti would pay compensation for the loss suffered by former slaveholders, including the loss of enslaved people, or face renewed invasion. Outnumbered and diplomatically isolated, Haiti complied. The indemnity imposed was staggering, equivalent to tens of billions in modern terms. To pay it, Haiti was forced to borrow from French banks, locking itself into a cycle of debt before its institutions could stabilize. This was not a peace settlement. It was economic warfare by other means. Revenue that might have gone to roads, schools, ports, or defense was siphoned off to service an obligation rooted in the logic of slavery. Haiti's sovereignty existed on paper, but its finances were mortgaged to the very power it had defeated. The message to the world was clear. Military victory did not guarantee freedom from control. Over the decades that followed, this system hardened. Debt constrained development. Political instability became chronic, not accidental. Foreign powers intervened repeatedly, often framing their actions as stabilization or assistance while securing their own interests. By the early 20th century, the United States had replaced France as Haiti's primary external controller, occupying the country militarily and restructuring the economy to fit American priorities. The methods changed. The outcome did not. What makes Haiti's story uncomfortable is not just the brutality of its punishment, but its familiarity. The pattern established in the 19th century would be repeated elsewhere. Isolate defiant nations, restrict access to capital, impose debt, intervene selectively, and then point to the resulting instability as evidence of inherent failure. Haiti was not forgotten because it was irrelevant. It was forgotten because its existence contradicted the narratives of benevolent empire and inevitable hierarchy. By the time the 20th century reframed Haiti as a failed state, the conditions for that failure had been engineered for generations. The victory over Napoleon, one of the most significant military defeats of an imperial power by a colonized people, faded from popular memory. What remained was the aftermath, stripped of context and presented as destiny. The consequences of that engineered weakness did not unfold in dramatic explosions, but in quiet constraints that tightened year after year. Haiti did not collapse overnight. It was slowly compressed. Every budget decision, every attempt at reform, every effort to modernize was filtered through the same reality. Repayment came first. Roads remained unfinished. Ports aged. Armies shrank. Political power became something to be seized quickly and exploited before the next crisis arrived. Instability was not a cultural flaw. It was a rational response to scarcity imposed from the outside. Foreign observers rarely acknowledged this architecture. Instead, they focused on symptoms. Coups were treated as evidence of incapacity rather than pressure. Poverty was framed as failure rather than extraction. When interventions came, they arrived wrapped in a language of order and assistance, never an admission of responsibility. By the time external control shifted from European banks to American strategic interests in the early 20th century, the narrative was already set. Haiti was no longer discussed as a nation that had shattered an empire, but as a problem to be managed. The occupation that followed reinforced the pattern rather than breaking it. Haitian finances were restructured to guarantee foreign creditors. Forced labor was reintroduced under different names to build infrastructure that primarily served external trade. Resistance was crushed efficiently and documented poorly. Once again, control was exercised without formal colonization, and once again, it was justified as necessary. The logic never changed. Stability for investors mattered more than sovereignty for Haitians. Over time, the original crime of punishment faded from public memory. The indemnity was rarely mentioned. The isolation was treated as a footnote. Haiti's revolution was reduced to a curiosity, stripped of its strategic meaning. What remained was a nation perpetually described as broken, without reference to the hands that had bent it. This amnesia was not accidental. Remembering Haiti accurately would require acknowledging that global systems punish excessive defiance more severely than failed obedience. 2 centuries after independence, the pattern is unmistakable. Nations that challenge established hierarchies are rarely crushed outright. They are constrained, indebted, and destabilized until their example no longer inspires others. Haiti was simply the first place where this method was refined. Its revolution exposed the vulnerability of empire. Its punishment became a template. The tragedy is not that Haiti dared to be free. The tragedy is that it succeeded, and the world responded by ensuring that success would carry a permanent cost. When modern commentators ask why Haiti struggles, they are often asking the wrong question. The real question is how any nation could have thrived under such sustained pressure. Haiti's story is not just history. It is instruction. It shows how power adapts when brute force fails, how control persists without flags or governors, and how victory on the battlefield can be neutralized through ledgers, loans, and silence. Understanding Haiti is not about pity. It is about recognizing a system that still operates quietly wherever freedom threatens profit. If this story moved you, do not treat it as an isolated tragedy. Treat it as a warning, written in blood, debt, and forgotten victories.